I realise this. So, before break, so you should have loaded up your RStudio application. You should have your matrices that you created before break. You should have the 3 matrices that were created. I think it was field goals, games, and salary, wasn't it? Something like that. Brandon's not in, so I'm assuming that's right. Excuse me. So we should now have the 3 matrices. But what is wrong with our matrices at the minute? What's not good about them? It's not true. They are useful, but effectively, let's coin it a different phrase. I'm just going to run my application here. I'm going to run that. Let's just get to the end of that. Salary. If I run salary, if I just run this line of code here, let's make that a little bit bigger. What's different from my matrix here to yours?
Has the name and the dates.
It has what?
The name and the dates.
It has the name and the dates. It has labels, row labels and column labels. Does yours? And I'm assuming with Brandon, I'm asking a redundant question there because Brandon's already answered it. Yours doesn't, does it? At the minute. What does yours have instead?
Numbers.
Just numbers, column numbers, yes? And does it have any row labels? Don't think it does it? No. So one of the things that we want to do to make this useful, because tables are a completely, and I am going to use matrices and tables interchangeably here. Tables are a really useful way of displaying data. Now there are problems with tables. Well, let me go back. Why would we show data in tables? No, I'm going to rephrase that question. My apologies. Why do we show data in charts and graphs?
Makes it easy to read.
Makes it easy to read. Yeah? Why? You're absolutely right, Jack. I'm not in any way questioning the validity of your answer, but why? Charlie?
Yeah, looking at that table there, it's got the names on and the years. We know what it is because we've studied it in context, but someone else might not. So that's why they're in charts and graphs.
Okay, good. Absolutely right. Both absolutely right answers. What's the other thing we get from a chart and graph?
Visual.
What visually? What can't I see there? I can see it if I look really hard, but what?
Paid the most.
Who gets paid the most? Yes? At a glance. I can't see the trends, yes? I can't see the highs and the lows. I can't see if there's any patterns within the data. Now I could, yes? I could if I studied that table. I mean, it's only 10 by 10, so there's 100 pieces of data. It's still a lot for the human eye. So why would I have a table? Why do we use tables? And I strongly suggest that you use tables in conjunction with charts and graphs in a dashboard. Why would you have the tables with the data in available at the same time?
So you can change it.
Not so you can change it, but excuse me, I've just finished a can of pulp very quickly. You don't really need to know that, but with a chart or graph, I see the visuals, yes, and I can read some of the data, yes. But if I want to know specific data, context, yes, specific values, this might be helpful and is always helpful, yes. So I strongly suggest that you have a table alongside it, in some cases with a dashboard, because dashboards give you points of interest with visualizations, but the table gives you the specific context. So what we're going to look at now is how can we make these a little bit better. Now, we're going to use the key terms and key phrases that we've discussed previously. So we're going to name the dimensions are given to the names of the rows and columns in matrices. So this is why it's so important that it's the same type of data that exists, and the same amount of data, because we're going to use a vector in this sense, in this situation, sorry, to create these. So, we're going to go row names, yes? We're going to use the row names function. We're going to apply it to a particular matrix, and then we're going to state what those row names are going to be. Everybody following that? Yeah? Now, what have I created here? I'm going to keep questioning you because I want to drip feed this stuff through. What is this here at the end? It's got the C, it's got parentheses. It's a vector. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a vector. It's a vector. So we've got this here, yeah, and we've created it. Now, how many matrices have we created?
3.
3. So if we use this function as it's written here, how many times are we going to have to create this piece of code for the label, the row labels in our...
Is it on how many players now?
Yeah, so if we've got row names and these are going to be the players, how many versions of this are we going to have to create for the matrices we've created?
Loads. Surely.
It's probably my fault, Jolly. I'm probably asking. So you're right, absolutely. We're going to have the 10 players here, yes, in this vector.
I was about to say, don't we already have the player names in a matrix, so we just call the matrix or the vector?
We call the vector,
Right.
yes, because if we do that, rather than creating this row, this data 3 times, yes, because we've got 3 matrices, which means we're having to type out the players' names 30 times, we call the vector once. We want to be lazy programmers. Does that make sense to everybody? Now I'm going to show you this in context. Column names work in exactly the same way. So what I've done here, and I'm just going to try and make this a little bit smaller again so you can see my code. Oops. Is I've got 2 vectors up here called seasons and players. I think you might have one called years and players. Is that what you've got at the top of the data I shared with you? Yeah? What is it?
Years and players.
Years and players. And they're already specified in there. Now, what type of data is that? Now, I'm asking you to think about this, not actually to look at the data here. What type of data are these?
There's string values.
String values. How do you know that?
Well, because they're in quotation marks.
In quotation marks. Good. And what I've done here is I've gone col names, yes, and row names, and then I've got the name of the matrix. Yes? That's how you use this function. It's a function that sits alongside a matrix. Column names and row names. Now we know that column names and row names won't be a function that sits in a vector. Why not? How many dimensions does a vector have? 1.
Oh, vector.
Matrix has 2 vectors. Matrix has 2 dimensions. Vector has 1 dimension. Yes, so that's why we've got it. So the name of our matrices, and then we're calling the vector that we're using here, rather than having to write it out multiple times. Does that make sense? So I want you to add those in now, yes? Yeah? I want you to add those in, please, to your 3 matrices. Yeah, so you'll need to do this a couple of times. So if you look down here, I've had to do it for each of my matrices, yes? Because the parameter here, games, this is the column names for games. This is the row names for games. This is the column names for salary. Yes, the salary matrix. So we still have to repeat that. There's no way around that, yes? You're setting up individual matrices. So I'd like you to do that now, please.
John.
Yeah.
My matrix has just stopped working.
Okay, let's have a look. Could be that you've not run the data. Yeah, because if you've moved on to this machine, it's not called it through. So what it's trying to do is trying to call this vector. If you haven't run that data, that vector, it doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you try running everything, so Control H, then run it. There you go. Yeah?
Yeah.
All gravy.
Sorry, what's the orange stand for?
You know what, I can't remember. I was hoping they were going to ask for it. I can't remember what RM is. Remove. It's remove, I think, but I can't.
Remove matrix.
No, it's it stands for remove.
Oh, remove.
Remove objects.
Okay. So, what
So let me just have a look at why. That's what it is. So I am right, but
we've added the salary and then removed it.
So this. Yeah.
We do the players.
no idea.
So we're doing the players. The years that they played and the goals before towards the score.
Yeah. Mohammed's just asked me a question, which is what's RM? What I kind of hoped was nobody had asked because I couldn't remember. But it stands for remove. Yes, that's what it is. It's remove objects. So quite why I've got it in there, I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember. I did this about a year ago. But remove object, if I want to remove objects from a matrix, yes, or remove them from a certain thing. So if I want to change the data, etc., RM is remove. Don't need to do that today. But what you should get is something that looks a bit like this. So yeah, I've got the names of the players, followed by now I haven't got spaces in there, which is not ideal, but I've got the seasons across the top. And that's much clearer and much easier to start to review than anything else. Is this making sense? Everybody following this? Yeah? Anybody? And again, I encourage you to make comments throughout your code so that you've got something to refer to.
I'm so confused with the meetings in console. Something like
Have I clicked on the wrong thing?
something.
Have I?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's not in our
Error object.
Oh, right, never mind.
Is that what you?
My apologies. Okay, so
I just got an error. It says wage not found.
okay, so let's have a look. Let's have a look. So we've got error, wage not found. So wage. Yeah, you've not created the wage matrix. So you need to take this.
You just have to do that.
You need to paste it there. Yeah. So you're giving, when you're doing that, you're creating the matrix. Yes, which is fine. And you've outputted it, but you're not assigning it a name.
Right.
So if I now run this again,
There we go.
because it's now got a value attributed.
Yeah, yes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Alex, you okay?
So you just sign it, you sign it.
Have you run all the data? So run all of that. Wage not found.
Error, it will tell you 1 wage, 2 weeks.
Can I just have a look, Alex? Player 1 wage not found. You know what it is? Look at these. Look at these. Yeah? These are stupid. Yeah? More often than not, when you see this down here, one of two things. One, it's not run the original code. Yeah? Because remember, we're in a different room. So we've not come onto this machine yet, we've not run it through. A number of you have had that issue. But then, the other reason you'll see that is that it is stupid. And please don't think I'm being patronising in any way, shape or form. I have this error more times than I can care to mention. Yeah? It's when I've missed a capital. Yeah? What you're talking about here, so that there, even though you and I both know that's the same as that, but the computer says it's not the same name. Yeah? Because the capitalisation means it's different. And the computer deals in absolutes. Yeah, whereas we go, that's the same. Yeah? Makes sense? You okay? That one's not running. Have a look. Players in year. What's it saying? Players not found in year. Okay, so just control A for me. Airing on the field goals. Ah, right. No, you can't. Right. Because you haven't created the matrix yet. Yeah? So if we run this now, player one, yes? So that's worked. Yeah, that's worked. Year hasn't worked, why not? Players. Oh, full name. Yeah. So, Christoph's quite rightly pointed out. What's wrong with my code on the board? Christoph's not allowed to answer. Something wrong with my thing on the board. Typo. Shouldn't be column names, it should be call names. Yes? Should be call names. Yeah, that's the issue. Happy? So now you've got what we've been through over the last few weeks. We can present our data. We're now starting to get to a point where we've got presentable data. You okay? Yeah. Yeah. Now most of the errors that people are having is not because you're not able to do this. It's not because you're bad programmers. It's not because you've not been understanding what's going on. It's the same errors, the same issues that you're going to have for the rest of your days as a programmer. You've either not run a piece of code before you should have done, and you've got a typo. Yes, capitalization or non-capitalization of data. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. Drew, you okay? Okay, so tell me what it's not doing.
It's not the
Right, so tell me, look at your code, tell me what's wrong with that. No, read it. So you've done call names. You know what I think you've done? And you tell me if I'm right here. You copied and pasted that line, put it down there. Oh, okay. I was trying to get you here. But that's easy done. Yes? Easy done. It's not a bad thing, but because this line runs after this line, yeah, it overwrites it. Yeah? So if you just change that to row names, it's fish.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Have no interest
Yeah,
in
yeah,
it.
Yeah. Again, sorry.
I really can't remember.
Yeah. That's good. Nothing wrong. Again, these aren't bad
Again, I think it's right.
bad elements. Yes, it's not bad coding. It's just easy mistakes. The thing for me is I don't mind people making these mistakes because next time you do it, that's one of the first things you look at. Yeah. You only build up your experience of understanding stuff by getting things wrong. Yeah. Makes sense.
John, you know this on the board, but how do we get that on our page? The
presentation.
Yes. Now, apparently, what I have done is I've opened up a Python session, which means for anybody in R, I'm in the wrong session. Yes, but if you want the presentation, if you go to the R team, go to Files, you'll see the presentation. Charlie. What's up?
Just looking at the naming.
Can I have a look?
No, it's spelling mistake.
Just don't know why.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is cool.
Oh, it's season, not season.
No, just copy paste.
Just these mistakes.
No, but I just said the truth. I don't care that people make mistakes. Listen, I'm not an expert programmer, but I've made these mistakes countless times. And so the first thing I look at is, okay, is that function right? The matrix name right? Is that right? We look at that, and the reason it's coming back, so the error, you should get something that says seasons don't exist. Yeah, so that's a big giveaway that either it's named incorrectly, as in capitalization or another S on the internal rather than singular, or it's called something different. That's just a big giveaway, and that's new. Yes, it's not. If you run everything, it's syntactic right. Yes. No worries. You can. Okay. Can I have another one? So. Right. So I'm just going to get rid of that now. Yes. Right. Right. Okay. So this is just this bit here. So you've got a vector called year with those values in. And you've got players as a vector, yeah? What you've done here is try to create a new vector with the word year in it. Yes? But if I just get rid of those things, I'm now calling that vector with the values in it. Yes? Now, provided it's the same length as the other vectors, it will work. You understand the difference? Yeah. One's calling something by name, one's trying to create a new vector. So if we run this now,
How many?
5. And then, wait, so the big bird
players
crystal,
and
right?
you.
Yeah, there's a eagle
No,
west
sorry,
which
sorry.
shoots a laser, right? If they're like 300 as well as the 5. One's bad and not.
Oh, it should be row names. That's one. Yeah? So, see, even on that.
Yeah, there's the one.
Player wage. Object player wage.
Yeah, how does that work?
Player wage is there.
This is just make the kind of normal.
Eric and Coleman's player wage.
Money increase the level of
So we ran it through, so
Yeah, I'm just
New Horizon. Yeah. So you can choose later. Oh yeah, yeah. When you complete the mission, you have something you complete the mission, you get like 3 items. It's 3 legendaries. Oh, train as well. Oh yeah, that's what I learned about. You know when you cap outfits and guns, you can literally change it to like anything you collect. So you could literally have common and have it look like a legendary.
There you go.
the biggest.
Right, okay. You know why it's not showing?
Well, how do you do it?
Because you built a vector, you wrote it all down.
I think you might have to do it first.
So one was a capitalisation, yeah, that's all it is. And the reason I'm able to take that is because it's working on players, but it's not working on column names. Yeah, so there's something not quite right there, that's the indicator, that's not reset. The reason, as Mohammed should quite rightly pointed out, is it runs, yes?
Yeah.
So you add to it,
I got a
it
letter
runs
and I-
without the labels.
Yeah.
Then it goes blue, fine, no problem. But then you don't get the output because you made the row and column labels after the output. Yeah, so we run it again. Now we run the output after we've assigned the labels. Yeah, that's all it is.
It is a
None of that is bad. And those are,
You don't
I'd say for every one of these, those are the errors you're going to make. From now until you stop programming, you are going to make those errors. Still do. Yes? I've PC code in there, the RM, which I can't remember why I put it in. Yes? Doesn't make any sense. So, it might do later on. Well, yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like vision, that's it. It's good. If you do the same thing with vision.
I don't know.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, this is for my glossary of films. Sorry.
Hey, I don't knock it. I think it's a good idea. I want to get more of them printed. Right. Are we all about there now? Yeah? Are you keeping your chin warm? Josh looked to make sure it wasn't him again. Right. Okay, so I'm going to mention something else before we move on. A few weeks ago, we did a few weeks ago now, before Christmas, obviously, we did operations, not by operations. What did I mean by operations? What do I mean by operations? If I used a different word, you get it without any hesitation.
Is it like comparisons, like greater than or equal to?
Yeah, addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, comparisons, etc. When we did operations with vectors, what did we know we had to do? What were the rules? Do we remember?
Well, they have to be the same length as.
Yeah, that's well read, and actually the same rules for vectors. Yeah.
That's fine. I didn't say that.
Listen, I don't care if you read it off the board, yeah, because it means I've given away the answer before I should have done. But you're absolutely right. Yes, must be of the same type and same length. You cannot do a mathematical equation or mathematical function on a text value and a numerical value. Agreed? They've got to be of the same type and same length. And vectors work in exactly the same way. And this is where vectors really come to the fore. And this is where R really comes to the fore. Because in Python, and I know, again, fully appreciate some people weren't here for Python, that's fine. In Python, if we wanted to carry out, okay, so I'm just going to find, hold on a minute. So I've got a matrix for games, and I've got a matrix of points. Agree? Everybody happy with that? Now, that's points in a season. Yes, I think. So if I go further down, minutes played, field goals, there we go, points. Okay. What's the problem with looking at, and this is where you start to think about analysis, and this is where vectors are really so important. What's the problem with me looking at points alone and judging whether somebody was good, bad, or indifferent?
You don't know how many games they played.
You don't know how many games played. Why does that matter, Brandon?
Because if they played less games, we've got a lot of points compared to someone who's played a lot of games with like a few points, 2 games. So one's more better than the other.
Correct. Absolutely spot on. Charlie?
Points don't necessarily imply good performance because I don't think, a defender will get many points.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So there are 2 factors in there. One which we haven't got, which is position. Yes, context. You're absolutely fine. And basketball's slightly different, yes, in that sense, because we have, I played basketball a long, long time ago. Yes, that doesn't happen anymore. But I did play football. Yes, I was the only player on our team an entire season that didn't score. Yes, even our goalie scored, and that's because he played at front one game. All right, I was a defender. That's what I did. Yes, I didn't get to that point of scoring. So Charlie's absolutely right. That context is so important. Now, I'm going to take that to one side because it's not going to help me now because I haven't got that data. But I'm going to pick up on Brandon's point. If these are people that generally score, and that's what we're analysing here, yes, I can't just look at points alone because Kevin Durant, yes, in the first season, whatever it is, 2011, scored 903 points compared to Kobe Bryant's 2,832. Now, I don't know whether that's good, bad, or different. I don't know anything other than that, but that's why totals are not ideal. Okay, I go back to that register analysis I was doing, yes? I did the average number of days between missed registers because total days is just ridiculous, yeah? I want to know if there's a major problem. So how do I, and one of the things I can do now is use the two matrices together to create a third matrix. Does that make sense? Which is going to be average points per game, which evidently I haven't done, which I thought I had done. Anyway, so I want to create a new matrix. In fact, I'm going to create a new matrix, and I'm going to go, I'm going to call it av points game. It's going to be games divided by points, if that is indeed what I've called it. Points is that one, that's fine. Field goals, games.
Total of goals.
Yeah, so I'm just going to see if this runs. Points not found. I mean points, oh, I've not run the whole thing.
Yeah.
What have I got now? Let's go back to Kevin Durant and I've done that the wrong way around, haven't I? I've done that the wrong way round. Points per game, isn't it? Rather than the other way around. Otherwise I get a really stupid value. There we go. Right, now let's look at Kobe Bryant and let's look at Kevin Durant again. We know in their first seasons that with data we've got that Kobe Bryant had more points, more than double the amount of points. Yeah? Now look at the analysis we've got down here. Who was better?
I think.
Why?
He's got the most points on average.
Most points per game on average. Is, looking at our data here, Kevin Durant and Derrick Rose were the worst in that list, yes, for total points. Is Kevin Durant the worst in that list? No. Actually, he's fourth?
Yeah.
Fifth in the list. Yes?
He's not last.
He's not last, or he's not second to last, yes? But actually, Derrick Rose, who got 597 points, only scored 14 points per game. He's bottom of both lists. That gives context to the data and makes it easier to read and it stops it being skewed. Does that make sense? Yeah? Does everybody understand what we've just done there? So we've done an operation on this, yes? We've carried out an operation on our data to give it context. Now, whether you know anything about basketball or not, if we look at this, we've got points, yes, we've got field goal attempts and field goals scored. What might we want to do with that? How many times I've tried to shoot and how many times it's gone in? How could I use those two matrices to give me an outline of success of a player?
Standard deviation.
We could use standard deviation, but I could also just divide it. The number of attempts you've made by the number of goals you scored by the number of attempts, yes? Means on average, every whatever shots you make, you're going to score 5, 10, yes? Does that make sense? You'll be following this. Now, whether you're in sport or not, it doesn't matter. But the principles that we're talking about here can be applied whatever. Number of customers coming through the door, on average, how many do I sell to? Yes? Number of posts that I put on social media, how many conversions does that make in my sales? Yes? Yeah, you're following this? Yeah? And then you can use it for student analysis. On average, you come in with grades A, B, or whatever it is, yes, and you're going to leave with X based on what people came in with, based on what people leave. There is so much you can do with this. So, what I'm going to ask you to do is just to implement a couple of operations, yes? And then we're going to use the last 15 minutes to start to visualize that. That make sense? Yeah, so a couple of operations, make sure, so you can use the one I've done, points per game, absolutely fine. I can see some people have already done it already. Make sure you're commenting your code because you're going to need to come back to this. And then we're going to finish off with starting to visualize the data. It's not very nice. I prefer Python and notebook for visualizations, but it works. Now, American sport, whether you're into American sport or not, it is hugely statistically driven. They have stats about everything, including the winningest team. I think they have, on the team that wins the most. Now, I'm not here to judge or ridicule, but that's a stat that they have. They have stats for everything. And actually, this sort of analysis, taking data, making it into a standardized format. I know you talked about standard deviation, Charlie. We'll get to that, hopefully. Is you standardize the data so you can compare it in relative terms. Otherwise, it's skewed. Yes? There are contexts like when we have voting for MPs, the person with the most number of votes gets through. That's fine. But in the US, they have the electoral college system. So it means that the states with the most densely populated areas are given more electoral college votes than places that are huge but don't have anybody living there, like Montana. I don't mean there's nobody living in Montana, but you get my point. Yes, it's a huge area with a sparsely populated, sparse population. Whereas California, very small area, but hugely populated. And Texas, another one, hugely populated, huge area. So they get more electoral college votes. So that's when this sort of analysis is so important. Now, if you're stuck or you're not sure about something, then give me a shout. Yep. Yeah, Jesse, okay. Now, what I'm going to ask from you two, when Jack does return, if you wouldn't mind sharing
Yeah, I know
or
that.
more files. You may not understand it. I'm not saying you will, but you'll have to do it. If you're happy to do that, that'd be great. Yes, thank you. That is, just been talking to Jack and Josh, but something, oh, I really like this. I really like the fact you're helping each other. One of the things I'm going to ask and encourage you to do, and I'm going to say it more openly tomorrow morning, is we're going to have a lot of disruption with students being off because of all, because of COVID, yes. Some people will be remote in, some people won't. If you've got notes and you can help and support somebody else that you know, class colleague that's not in, then I sincerely implore you, encourage you to do so, yes? As I would encourage them to do so as well. So I'd like to foster that culture as well that you are, and I know people will, yes? But if you can, that will be really useful. And we'll do everything we can to make sure the resources are available. That's why I'm recording today's session. All good? Brilliant. Drew, all good? The other thing I really like is that people are working together. Yes, I really, really do.
Just copy and paste.
Ah, okay, you're making it nice and neat as well, which is good. That's what I was looking at. Good, right. You okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just going through that. Right. Let's start to make it look pretty. Yes? You ready for this? We've got 10 minutes. We're not going to get through all of this today, but it will allow us to do a little bit of something. And wait till this. Right. So again, I implore you, please make sure you keep making comments. That's the hash key that you then just put a note in, and a comment shouldn't be extensive. Shouldn't be hugely descriptive. It should just give you a little note. So you can go back to it. Yes.
Attempt to write by points, isn't it? What was it called to write by attempts?
Attempts by points.
So if I divide it attempts by points, I get 0.7.
Say that again. What have you done with that?
I've done attempts divided by points.
Which means per attempt you get 7 points. Yes.
No, 0.7.
0.7 points. Yes.
Just the other way around.
No.
Correct.
Oh yeah, it is the other way around. Yeah, you want points per attempt. Sorry, my apologies. Just say it as you say. Yeah. So I get so many points per attempt. Yeah. So you get 1 point. So the most successful person is 23. Yeah. You see now, you can see who's the most successful, yes? Who's the most accurate. Yeah? That's what you're getting to. Or, sorry, not the most accurate, because some of those, what we don't know, is that's where the field goals, is it a 2-pointer or is it a 3-pointer?
Yeah. How many games are there?
Exactly. So now you're asking the right questions. You see, and this is why I love data analysis, because you go, oh, what about that? Ooh, what about that? Right! Here we go. Make it look pretty. We're going to use, now this has been chopped somewhat because I've cut the players' names off. But we talked, and I asked in here, what about visualizations? Why do we use visualizations and graphs and charts? Because it's easier to read. Yes? It's easy to represent the data. If you look at the tables that you've got now, as an eyeball exercise, or eyeballing the data, you're going to miss things. Yeah, data is going to merge into one. Particularly, I mean, we've only got a small data set here. It's only 100 pieces of data, and I know what I'm saying. There's only 100 pieces of data, but in terms of data analysis, that's a really small sample. But visualizing it, it's going to allow us to see very quickly if there's any outliers or anything else. So we're going to use this matplot function. Now, we did use matplotlib in Python, yes? Yes, after importing it. Now, we don't need to do necessarily this because we've got the imports at the bottom. Everything's packaged up. We can choose to use it or not. So, I'm hopeful there we go, there we go. Come on, what's up with it? So, this is what the matplot function does, okay? And it's a really simple function to get a very basic visualization, which I see some people have already done. Firstly, we know it's a function because it sits inside the parentheses. Okay, we've got the name of the function, we've got the parentheses. And again, I repeat that and I do a lot of repetition. Secondly, we have the name of the matrix. So this might be games, yes, it might be points per game or average points per game or whatever it is we've looked at. The type of plot, and I'm going to look at this and talk to you about this in a second. The type of plot pictures, and that's the points, yes? Whether it's a square, a triangle, or whatever it is, yes? You can see on mine in a minute. And we have the color. Now, you'll notice that this is a vector here, because what we're going to try and do as I go through this is, I'm going to go back slightly. What do you notice about that one? Different colors, different shapes. What does that, I know it's particularly small, but why does that make it easier to read?
Does it show a trend?
It does show trends, yes, because we've got the different arrows and different lines. But if they were all black lines,
You can just follow the colour, see what you want.
I can follow the color. Because there's a mishmash here, if they're all black lines, what am I potentially going to misread?
The results.
The results. The fact they're different colors, I know I've got two pinks, yes, but they've got different shapes. I can easily distinguish between which is one data and which is another. So data analysis, I've said this before, is a statistical, is a logical sequence and mindset as you approach things, but it's also quite creative. Because you've got to think about how people are going to perceive this data. Okay. So I'm going to hopefully give you an example of I'm going to run. Oh, there it is. Why is that not bringing the data? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I've done here. Can you see my screen? Yeah, it's not working here. I'm not quite sure why it's not working. I'm going to look into this. The T transposes. Do you know what I mean by transpose? Swaps them, yes. So if it was column and row, yes, it'll do row and column. It'll swap them round. Yeah, so you can use that in some cases. The type, now if you look at this, and I think it's tab, but I'll find out for next week, tells you the type of plot that you're going to have. Yes, the type, whether it's a line graph or a bar graph or whatever it is. These are the points. Now it's working on a vector, yes? Vector basis. So there are certain pictures that it's going. So it's attributing for each going in a cycle, yes? You can see here I've got square and square. I've got circle and circle, yes? So for the values I've got, it's going to go 15, 16, 17, 18, and then repeat. And those are particular pictures, yes, that are going to be attributed. And I'll find you the data that goes with that. And the colours are going to be 1 to 4, yes? And it's then going to repeat. That's why I've got pink and I've got pink again. Yeah, so it's repeating. So that's what that's doing. We've got those colours in there, and those are represented again down here because we want the legend, the players, to represent the same pictures and the same colours. Everybody okay with that? So what I'm going to do is what time are we on the screen?
Got 5 minutes.
Got 5 minutes. What I want you to do, whilst I try and work this out, is I want you to just take this line of code here, yes? These 2 lines of code, make sure they're in your thing. We're going to pick this up at the start of next week's session.
Well, it's not a problem in Excel, just write it down later.
That's another way that we could do it. So I'm going to do that now. Yes?
You can also put the other one so you can look at what the differences are.
We can. It's just not working at the minute. So what I'm going to do, that has been posted into the chat for the meeting. Yes?
The Python chat.
The Python chat. Yeah. So you can copy it into R. I'm going to stop recording.